Are we seriously having this conversation right now? Apparently we are. And once again, I need everyone hearing this to fully grasp the magnitude of what just unfolded. Getting beaten in a basketball game is one thing. Losses are part of sports. Sometimes your shots refuse to fall. The breaks go against you, or the other team catches momentum and never lets go. Fans can live with that. What fans should never have to accept is a post-game response filled with excuses, denial, and a complete refusal to take responsibility. What unfolded during the Indiana Fever press conference was frustrating, disappointing, and frankly disrespectful to every fan who spent their time and money supporting this team. We just watched a roster loaded with talent, including a generational point guard who's become one of the league's biggest driving forces, get outplayed, outworked, and outcoached by the Golden State Valkyries. Yet instead of owning the result, instead of acknowledging the mistakes and learning from them, the head coach and star center stepped in front of the microphones and pointed fingers everywhere except where they belonged. Let's begin with the most glaring moment from that disastrous media session. The Fever had just suffered a painful loss in a game that slipped away during the closing moments. Their final offensive possessions were chaotic, disorganized, and lacked any sense of execution. Naturally, a reporter asked Stephanie White about the final two shots and how those possessions unfolded. A coach willing to be honest would simply admit the team failed to execute, lost composure under pressure, and needed better preparation in critical moments. A coach focused on accountability would acknowledge those shortcomings and promise improvement. Instead, Stephanie White delivered a response that left many fans shaking their heads in disbelief.
What did you like about those final two shots, both the one before the jump ball and then the one to try and tie it?
I thought they were both good looks. They're a really good defensive team. And when you get an opportunity to get some clean looks, it's important. I thought we got some good looks.
Her response? She said she liked the shots they got. Seriously, what was she watching? Because it certainly did not look like the same game everyone else saw. Let's examine that possession closely. With the defense aggressively trapping and swarming CaitlinClark, she somehow delivers a perfectly timed pass into the paint to Aliyah Boston. This is supposed to be your franchise cornerstone in the front court. A player the organization has committed significant resources to as part of its future. Boston received the ball in a prime scoring position, but instead of making a strong, confident move toward the basket, everything immediately falls apart. She hesitates, loses control of the moment, spins aimlessly, and appears completely uncomfortable under pressure before throwing up a rushed attempt with no rhythm, no balance, and no conviction behind it. It was not a quality possession. It was a broken play that ended in desperation. Yet Stephanie White sat at the podium and told reporters she was satisfied with the looks they generated. That is not accountability. That is refusing to acknowledge what actually happened on the court. It reflects a coach unwilling to confront the flaws in her offensive approach and the execution failures that continue to surface in critical moments. And if that answer was frustrating, what happened next was even more difficult to understand. A reporter asked a straightforward basketball question, one focused entirely on strategy and game management. He wanted to know whether White expected the Valkyries' number 4 to log as many minutes as she did during the second half. It was a simple tactical question, the kind coaches answer every day. What followed only added more fuel to an already growing controversy.
Question for Coach. Did you expect number 4 for the Valkyries to play as much as she did in that second half? You think it's good?
Yeah.
Look, she didn't know you didn't. No, you didn't. Aliyah Boston had the point on the paper to show who she was talking about. She don't even know who number 4 is. Stephanie White wasn't prepared for her.
Did that really just happen? If you watch the clip, you know exactly why people were stunned. When the reporter asked a question, Stephanie White appeared completely caught off guard. She seemed unsure who the player was, forcing Aliyah Boston to lean toward the stat sheet and point directly at the name so her own coach could identify the Valkyries player being discussed. Think about that for a moment. The head coach appeared unfamiliar with a key member of the opposing rotation, a player who played a significant role in the game. Coaching at this level demands constant film study, detailed scouting reports, and thorough preparation for every matchup. The expectation is that you know the personnel, understand the tendencies, and have answers ready when adjustments are needed. That is why the moment drew so much attention. It created the impression of a team that was not fully prepared for what it was facing. And that concern did not begin with the press conference. It seemed to carry over from what fans witnessed on the court throughout the night, which brings us to Aliyah Boston. For long stretches of the first half, she struggled to impose her presence on the game. Despite being one of the most physically dominant players available to Indiana, she often found herself operating far from the basket instead of consistently using her size and strength where they could have the greatest impact. On top of that, several unnecessary fouls put her in difficult situations and disrupted any rhythm she was trying to establish. So when reporters later asked about the challenges presented by the Valkyries, many expected some reflection on the mistakes, missed opportunities, and discipline issues that affected her performance. Instead, accountability seemed noticeably absent from the conversation, leaving even more questions about a team that had just suffered a frustrating defeat.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't even able to get into a flow. I mean, I played the second half. I think it's super hard to try and figure out and understand how the refs are calling it. I think it's super hard to get charged fouls when I don't think anyone's in legal position. I mean, shout out to the Valks. I mean, they did a great job selling it, and the refs bought it, to be honest, so good for them.
Pay close attention to what was said next because it perfectly captures why so many fans were frustrated. Rather than focusing on execution, the conversation quickly shifted toward officiating. The explanation was that it was difficult to understand how the game was being called, that defenders were rarely in proper position, and that the Valkyries did an excellent job drawing whistles in their favor. But at some point, those explanations stopped sounding convincing. This is not a one-time occurrence or an isolated game. Foul trouble has been a recurring issue, regardless of the opponent, the arena, or the officiating crew assigned to the matchup. When the same pattern keeps repeating itself night after night, it becomes harder to blame external factors. The reality is that too often the offense develops late. The defense is already established, contact is initiated in crowded areas, and difficult situations are created that invite those calls in the first place. Instead of examining those habits, improving technique, and making adjustments through film study and preparation, the focus seemed to be directed elsewhere. The message came across as though responsibility belonged to the referees, the opposing team, or circumstances beyond anyone's control. That mindset is exactly what many fans struggle to accept because growth begins with acknowledging mistakes and learning from them. And that is where leadership becomes so important. Players often take cues from the environment around them. They follow the standards that are established by the coaching staff and the culture built within the organization, which is why the contrast between the two sidelines felt impossible to ignore. While Indiana appeared to be searching for answers throughout the night, Valkyries head coach Natalie Nakase seemed to have every adjustment ready. Her team looked organized, prepared, and disciplined from start to finish. And by the final buzzer, many observers felt she had clearly won the coaching battle in decisive fashion.
When are you going to talk about your coaching? When are you going to talk about you not having your team ready in practice? When are you going to talk about anything that you did wrong? Natalie Nakase coach circles around you, Stephanie White. When are you going to address it? Your team looked ill-prepared. We look unprepared damn near every game. This was ridiculous.
At what point does a conversation shift toward coaching responsibility? When does Stephanie White address the fact that her team often appeared disorganized, out of sync, and unable to respond when momentum started slipping away? Throughout the game, Natalie Nakase seemed one step ahead. She identified weaknesses, adjusted her strategy on the fly, and consistently put her players in positions to succeed. Every time Indiana looked ready to regain control, the Valkyries appeared to have an answer waiting. On the other side, the Fever struggled to find solutions as the game became increasingly difficult. Fans watched long stretches where the team seemed frustrated, disconnected, and unable to stop the momentum from swinging against them. And yet the post-game discussion rarely focused on those coaching decisions or the adjustments that never materialized. But the most shocking moment of the entire press conference was still to come. This was the exchange that left many fans questioning whether Stephanie White is truly maximizing a talent as unique as CaitlinClark. A reporter presented what should have been one of the easiest questions of the night. He asked whether there were similarities or noticeable differences in the way defenses are guarding Clark this season compared to last year. It was a straightforward basketball question and a perfect opportunity to discuss the attention Clark attracts, the defensive schemes built specifically to contain her, and the impact her presence has on every possession. Any coach would be expected to explain how opponents are adjusting and what challenges come preparing a player who constantly draws extra defenders. Instead, everyone in the room waited to hear Stephanie White's answer, and what came next quickly became one of the most talked about moments of the entire media session.
Here, where CaitlinClark had a tough shooting game, are there any similarities to how they guarded her last year to this year? Is there any different wrinkles at the team?
I mean, I don't know. I think she.
What do you mean you don't know? They ask, is it similarities in how they guarded her last year to this year? This is the head coach. She said, I don't know.
And then came the answer that left many fans completely stunned. The reporter asked a direct question about how defenses are approaching CaitlinClark this season compared to last year, and Stephanie White's response was simple: I don't know. Just think about that for a moment. This is not a minor detail or some obscure statistic buried deep in a scouting report. Understanding how opponents defend CaitlinClark is one of the most important responsibilities facing the entire coaching staff. Every game plan, every offensive adjustment, and every strategic decision revolves around recognizing how defenses are trying to limit one of the league's most influential players. That is why the answer immediately raised eyebrows. Fans expect a head coach to have detailed insight into the coverages, traps, double teams, and defensive schemes being used against their star player. They expect explanations, observations, and solutions. Instead, they heard uncertainty. Whether it was a momentary lapse, frustration after a difficult loss, or simply a response that came out wrong, the reaction from fans was swift because the question touched on a fundamental aspect of coaching. If opposing defenses are constantly changing the way they guard Clark, then identifying those adjustments and creating counters is a critical part of helping the team succeed. That is why so many people viewed the answer as troubling. In their minds, if a coach cannot clearly explain how opponents are defending the centerpiece of the franchise, it naturally leads to bigger questions about preparation, offensive strategy, and the team's ability to maximize the talent of a player who carries such enormous expectations every night she steps onto the court.
To free her up. Nothing. You put her out there on the island. The girl gets blitzed and trapped all game. You created nothing for CaitlinClark. You created nothing for CaitlinClark. They're asking you about the similarities and how they're guarding her. You're saying you don't know. Maybe that's why you have no idea on how to free her up. You don't know. You don't know nothing. You never know anything. I don't know. Oh yeah, I don't know.
Meanwhile, what adjustments were actually made to ease the pressure on CaitlinClark? She spent much of the night facing relentless defensive attention. Defenders picked her up the moment she crossed half court, denied her touches, trapped her aggressively in pick-and-roll situations, and forced the ball out of her hands whenever possible. The obvious question becomes, what counters were put in place to help her navigate that pressure? Where were the creative actions designed to free her up, create cleaner looks, and force the defense to make difficult choices? Too often, it felt like Clark was left to solve every problem on her own against multiple defenders. Then, after the game, fans were left hearing uncertainty rather than detailed explanations. On the defensive side, the concerns were just as noticeable. The Valkyries repeatedly found success with actions that seemed to go largely unanswered. Veronica Burton, in particular, looked comfortable for long stretches, and when Indiana finally applied additional pressure that resulted in a positive outcome, many viewers were left wondering why that adjustment was not revisited more often. Those are the kinds of decisions that naturally become talking points after a difficult loss. At some point, repeated struggles stop feeling like temporary setbacks and begin raising larger questions about preparation, execution, and leadership. That is why frustration among portions of the fan base continues to grow. Many supporters believe CaitlinClark is carrying an enormous burden, not only dealing with some of the league's most aggressive defensive schemes, but also operating within a system that is yet to consistently maximize her strengths. Whether that criticism is entirely fair or not, it is becoming a louder conversation after each disappointing performance. Fans are looking for accountability, adjustments, and evidence that lessons are being learned. Instead, many walked away from this press conference feeling more concerned than reassured. Now I want to hear from you. What was your biggest takeaway from the post-game comments? Did the explanation satisfy you? Or do you think tougher questions need be asked moving forward? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this breakdown. Subscribe for more WNBA coverage. And turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.